Ahoy, brave listeners. Welcome back to the high seas adventures of Tavish One Eye McTavish. In our last episode, Tavish claimed victory over the Spanish silver convoy and secured his place among the feared captains of the Caribbean. But with every triumph comes new dangers, and betrayal is never far behind. In today's story, Tavish must navigate treacherous waters both literally and figuratively. A new saboteur lurks within the ranks of the Golden Maiden, and a mysterious woman, Isabela, niece of the Governor of Havana, has been taken aboard. Is she a captive, or does she have her own hidden agenda? As the winds shift and the battles rage, Tavish will have to decide who to trust as enemies close in from all sides. Before we begin, tell me, what would you do if you suspected sabotage on your ship? How would you deal with a prisoner who might have more to offer than meets the eye? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And remember, this is only one chapter in an epic saga of betrayal, treasure, and adventure. Be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss the next thrilling tale of Tavish One Eye McTavish. Now, hoist the sails and prepare for the storm ahead. It's going to be a wild ride.
The bustling port of Tortuga was alive with noise and activity as the Golden Maiden rested at anchor. It had been a week since Tavish One Eye McTavish outmaneuvered the pirate hunter Gideon Flint and secured the convoy's treasure. The Golden Maiden's crew was in high spirits, but beneath the surface, tensions simmered. Rumors of Tavish's exploits spread like wildfire through the taverns and alleys, attracting fortune seekers, spies, and those who sought to challenge his growing power. Tavish walked through the crowded marketplace with Dougal, his trusted gunner, and Eliza Black-Eyed Barnes, who managed the crew's affairs with a fierce hand. Eliza fell into step beside Tavish, her eyes scanning the crowd with a keen gaze. "Word is, there's a merchant ship in the harbor with connections to the Spanish crown," she said, her tone laced with intrigue. "Heavily guarded, but carrying something valuable enough to justify the risk." Tavish grinned. "Something valuable, you say? A perfect target to keep the crew sharp. What else do you know?" "Not much," Eliza replied, her eyes meeting his. "But there's a woman on board. A noble, they say. Could be a ransom opportunity or something more." Her voice carried a hint of something unspoken, but Tavish chose to let it pass for now. "We'll investigate," Tavish decided, turning toward the docks. "Dougal, gather a few of our best fighters. We need to find out exactly what we're dealing with." The next night, the crew of the Golden Maiden crept through the darkness toward the merchant vessel, El Tesoro. Tavish had selected a group of 10, including Dougal, Eliza, and a few of his most skilled fighters. The plan was simple: board the ship, seize any valuables, and escape before the guards could rally. Under the cover of darkness, they approached the merchant ship in rowboats, silent as shadows on the water. Tavish raised his hand, signaling the men to slow as they neared the hull of the El Tesoro. "Quiet now," he whispered. "Dougal, you and 3 others take the starboard side. I'll lead the rest on port. Remember, we strike hard and fast." As they scaled the ship's sides, the tension was palpable. Tavish climbed over the railing and onto the deck, his cutlass at the ready. 2 guards spotted him, their eyes widening in alarm. Before they could sound the alarm, Tavish lunged forward, slashing in a single, fluid motion that sent one guard sprawling to the deck. The other guard swung his sword, but Tavish parried and knocked him unconscious with the hilt of his cutlass. A whistle cut through the air, Dougal's signal. The fight was on. The deck erupted into chaos as pirates and guards clashed, swords clanging in the moonlight. Dougal fought like a bear, swinging his axe with brutal force, while Eliza darted among the fray, dispatching guards with deadly precision. Tavish moved toward the ship's cabin, his eyes scanning for their prize. As he approached the door, it swung open, revealing a man in fine clothes with a sword drawn. "Captain McTavish," the man sneered. "We've been expecting you." Tavish's eye narrowed. "Then you should have prepared better," he growled, stepping into the cabin. Their swords met in a flurry of strikes, Tavish driving his opponent back with a series of quick, precise blows. The merchant captain was skilled but overconfident, and Tavish took advantage of his missteps. With a swift maneuver, he disarmed the man, sending his sword clattering to the floor. "Yield," Tavish commanded, his cutlass poised at the man's throat. "Do what you will," the captain spat. "The lady will never come with you." Tavish glanced over his shoulder and caught sight of a woman standing in the shadows. She was dressed in a cloak, but even in the dim light, her posture and poise spoke of nobility. Her eyes were defiant, but there was a glimmer of curiosity, or was it fear? "Lady or not," Tavish said coldly, "she's coming with Eliza. Take the cabin. Dougal, secure the treasure hold. Move!" As the fighting raged on deck, Eliza entered the cabin, her eyes locking onto the woman. "Best come quietly, my lady," she said, "unless you fancy a swim." The woman raised her chin defiantly. "I'll not be cowed by pirates," she retorted, though her eyes betrayed a hint of uncertainty. Tavish sheathed his cutlass and approached, his gaze steady. "Cowed? No, but you'll come with us nonetheless. You'll be treated with respect, but if you resist, my patience will wear thin." After a tense moment, the woman nodded. "Very well, but know this. I am Isabela de la Vega, niece to the Governor of Havana. My capture will not go unanswered." Tavish allowed himself a brief smile. "Then let's make sure they don't find us, shall we?" As Eliza led Isabela to the rowboats, Tavish stepped back out onto the deck. The remaining guards had been subdued, and Dougal was overseeing the transfer of loot. With practiced efficiency, the pirates loaded the treasure onto the rowboats and made their escape, leaving the El Tesoro adrift in the harbor. Back on the Golden Maiden, Tavish stood at the prow, watching Tortuga fade into the distance as the ship sailed into the open sea. Isabela had been brought to the captain's quarters under Eliza's watchful eye. Tavish knew there was much to be discussed, but that would come later. For now, they had made a bold move, and he needed to decide the next steps. The following morning, Tavish entered the captain's quarters, where Isabela sat by the window, gazing out at the horizon. She turned as he approached, her eyes assessing him coolly. "So, Captain McTavish," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "What now? Do you intend to ransom me to my family, or will you keep me as some trophy of your piracy?" Tavish studied her for a moment before replying. "I haven't decided yet, but I can assure you, you'll be treated well as long as you cooperate. You are valuable, Isabela, in ways you may not yet understand." Isabela's eyes narrowed. "You speak as if you're anything more than a common thief." "A thief, perhaps," Tavish admitted, his voice steady, "but not a fool. I know you have knowledge of the Spanish trade routes and military movements, information that could prove far more valuable than any ransom." She stared at him, her expression hardening. "And what makes you think I would betray my people for you?" Tavish shrugged. "Perhaps you won't, but life aboard this ship can be persuasive. In time, you may come to see things differently." Isabela turned back to the window, her silence speaking volumes. Tavish let it linger, knowing that the seeds of doubt and curiosity had been sown. He left the cabin, feeling the weight of what he had just set in motion. Days passed as the Golden Maiden sailed southward, seeking calmer waters and evading Spanish patrols. The crew remained wary of their new passenger, and Tavish kept a close watch on Isabela. She was defiant but composed, spending most of her time on deck, observing the crew with an unreadable expression. One night, as a storm gathered on the horizon, the mood aboard the ship grew tense. Tavish ordered the sails trimmed and the rigging secured, preparing for the oncoming tempest. Dougal approached him, his face grim. "Captain, I've found something troubling," he said, holding up a piece of frayed rope. "Someone's been tampering with the rigging. It could have caused a disaster during the storm." Tavish's eyes darkened. "Sabotage," he muttered. "Do we know who?" Dougal shook his head. "Not yet, but the crew is on edge. They suspect the lady." Tavish nodded slowly. "I'll handle this. Keep the men focused on weathering the storm." As the winds howled and the ship rocked violently, Tavish made his way to the quarterdeck, where Isabela stood, gripping the railing. He approached her, his voice cutting through the gale. "We've had an incident," he said bluntly. "Someone tried to sabotage the ship. Do you know anything about it?" Isabela turned to face him, her hair whipping in the wind. "You think it was me?" she asked, her voice steady despite the storm around them. "It's crossed my mind," Tavish replied, "but I prefer to hear it from you." She met his gaze, her eyes fierce. "I may despise what you are, Captain, but I am not a fool. Sabotaging this ship would put my own life at risk, as well as yours. Why would I choose such recklessness when I might yet find another way to escape?" Tavish studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Fair point. But make no mistake, If I find you had a hand in this, there will be consequences. She smirked slightly. I'd expect nothing less. The storm raged around them, but Tavish found himself caught in a different tempest, the kind that brewed in the eyes of a woman who was both a captive and a mystery. He turned away, his thoughts churning. There were battles yet to be fought, both on the sea and within the heart of his own ship. The storm pounded the Golden Maiden relentlessly, waves crashing over the deck and winds howling through the rigging. Tavish barked orders as the crew struggled to keep the ship steady, his eyes never leaving the horizon. Hours passed before the storm finally began to abate, leaving the sea churning but calmer. Once the weather had eased, Tavish assembled his officers in the captain's quarters. Dougal, Eliza, and Sable, the navigator, crowded around the table, their faces grim in the lantern light. Sabotage during a storm, Dougal muttered, rubbing his temples. Someone's playing a dangerous game. Tavish nodded. Aye, we have a saboteur on board, and I intend to root them out. The crew suspects our guest, Isabela, but I'm not convinced. Sable leaned forward, his eyes sharp. What if she's part of a larger plot? The Spanish could have sent her as a spy, knowing you'd capture that merchant ship. Eliza shook her head. It's possible, but unlikely. She has too much to lose if the ship sinks. More likely, we have someone in our own ranks who thinks they can seize power by sowing chaos. Tavish's jaw tightened. The idea that one of his crew could be plotting against him gnawed at his insides. Then we keep a close watch on everyone, including Isabela. Spread the word that anyone caught plotting against this ship will face the full wrath of the captain. As his officers dispersed, Tavish made his way to the deck, where the crew was busy repairing the storm's damage. He found Isabela near the railing, her eyes fixed on the horizon, face pale from the ordeal. You survived, he said, coming up beside her. Not all of my crew were so lucky. She glanced at him, her expression unreadable. The sea takes what it will, Captain. We are but its playthings. Tavish studied her, trying to discern if her calm demeanor masked some deeper involvement in the sabotage. If I find out you had anything to do with this sabotage, the consequences will be severe, he said, his voice low. Isabela turned to face him fully, her eyes burning with defiance. And what of your loyalty to me? You claim to be a man of honor, yet you treat me as if I am already guilty. Trust is a two-edged sword, Captain. For a moment their gazes locked, the tension between them thick as the fog rolling off the sea. Tavish's mind was a whirl of conflicting thoughts. Distrust, intrigue, and a curious pull toward this enigmatic woman. Before he could reply, a shout rang out from the crow's nest. Ship approaching off the starboard bow! Tavish tore his eyes away from Isabela and strode to the quarterdeck, grabbing his spyglass. Through the lens, he spotted the outline of a sloop sailing toward them, its sails bearing the colors of another pirate. Ready the guns, he commanded. Prepare to engage. The crew sprang into action, manning the cannons and readying weapons. Tavish scanned the approaching vessel. It was fast and maneuverable, likely a privateer seeking to test the mettle of the Golden Maiden. The sloop fired first, a warning shot across the bow. Tavish grinned. They're trying to intimidate us. Let's show them the folly of their ways. Hard to port. Ready the starboard cannons. The Golden Maiden swung into position, its cannons lining up with the sloop. Fire! Tavish roared, and the ship's broadside erupted in a deafening volley, the blast sending smoke and flame into the air. Cannonballs slammed into the sloop's side, shattering wood. The enemy vessel veered sharply, trying to circle around, but Tavish anticipated their move. Cut across their stern, he ordered. Prepare to board. The Golden Maiden closed the distance, its crew readying grappling hooks and boarding planks. The sloop's crew put up a fierce resistance, firing muskets and swinging cutlasses as the pirates swarmed onto their deck. Tavish led the charge, his cutlass flashing in the sunlight as he carved a path through the melee. Dougal fought beside him, his axe cleaving through enemy lines with brutal efficiency. Eliza was a whirlwind, her twin daggers striking with lethal precision. The fighting was fierce, but the crew of the Golden Maiden pressed their advantage, driving the defenders back. Tavish spotted the sloop's captain, a burly man with a scar running down his face, rallying his men near the mainmast. With a growl, Tavish charged, their swords clashing in a furious exchange of blows. The sloop's captain was strong, but Tavish fought with the skill and resolve of a man who had faced death too many times to be afraid. A feint, a twist, and a sharp strike, and Tavish sent the captain's sword spinning from his grasp. He grabbed the man by the collar, holding his cutlass to his throat. "Yield, or I send you to the depths." Tavish snarled. The captain grimaced but nodded, signaling his surrender. Tavish shoved him to the deck and turned to his crew. "The ship is ours. Secure the prisoners and search the hold for anything of value." As the crew moved to plunder the sloop, Tavish noticed a figure standing at the entrance to the captain's cabin. It was Isabela, her eyes fixed on the aftermath of the battle, a flicker of something unreadable crossing her face. "You fought well," she said quietly as he approached. "Did you expect otherwise?" Tavish replied, sheathing his cutlass. "No," she admitted, her gaze meeting his. "But I wonder, how long can you keep fighting like this before the sea claims you as one of its own?" Tavish felt a surge of something, anger, curiosity, maybe even admiration. "I fight because it's what I am," he replied, "and I survive because I make my own fate. You'd do well to learn that if you intend to live among pirates." She smiled, a faint, almost mocking smile. "Perhaps I already have." Tavish's brow furrowed. Was she toying with him, or was there something more to her words? He turned away, knowing that this woman was a puzzle he couldn't afford to solve right now. Back on the Golden Maiden, Tavish summoned Dougal, Eliza, and Sable to the captain's quarters. The loot from the sloop was sparse, mostly provisions and a small stash of silver. More pressing, however, was the matter of the saboteur still lurking among them. "We need to root out the traitor before they strike again," Tavish began, his gaze sweeping over his officers. "Dougal, how many of the crew were below deck during the storm?" "Only a handful," Dougal replied, stroking his beard thoughtfully. "Mostly those who were wounded from the last raid." Tavish's mind raced. Someone with access to the lower decks during the storm could have easily tampered with the rigging. But who among his crew would have the motive to undermine him? "I'll have a word with the men," Eliza volunteered. "See if any of them know more than they're letting on." "Good," Tavish said. "We need answers, and soon." As the meeting dispersed, Tavish made his way to the main deck. Isabela stood at the bow, the wind tugging at her cloak as she stared out to sea. For a moment, Tavish hesitated, then approached her. "You heard what happened," he said, his voice carrying a hint of accusation. "Someone tried to sabotage the ship. If you have any information, now is the time to speak." Isabela turned to face him, her expression one of icy calm. "You distrust me because I am not one of your crew," she replied. "But you should ask yourself, who benefits most if this ship were to fail?" Tavish studied her, weighing her words. "If you have suspicions, I need to hear them." She sighed, turning her gaze back to the horizon. "There is a man among your ranks who watches me with more interest than mere suspicion. I have seen him speak with your officers, but I do not know his name. Perhaps he is your traitor, or perhaps not, but he is worth watching." Tavish felt a flicker of something. Was it a hint of trust between them? He nodded curtly. "I'll look into it, but remember this, Isabela. If I find that you are playing me false, the consequences will be dire." She smiled, but it was a smile without warmth. "I wouldn't expect anything less, Captain." That evening, Eliza approached Tavish, her eyes sharp with determination. "I've found something, Captain," she said. "A few of the men reported seeing a crewman, Jack Carter, near the rigging during the storm. When I questioned him, he grew nervous." Tavish nodded grimly. "Bring him to the quarterdeck. We'll settle this here and now." The crew gathered as Jack Carter was dragged to the quarterdeck, his face pale and eyes darting nervously. Tavish stepped forward, his presence commanding silence. "Carter," Tavish began, his voice cold as the steel of his cutlass. "You've been accused of sabotage. What say you in your defense?" Carter swallowed, his eyes darting around the crowd before finally settling on Tavish. I don't know what you're talking about, Captain. I'm loyal." Tavish drew his cutlass, pointing it at Carter's throat. "Loyalty is not proven by words, but by actions. You were seen tampering with the rigging during the storm. Why?" Carter's resolve crumbled, his knees buckling. All right, it was the lady," he cried, pointing toward Isabela. "She offered me gold to damage the rigging, said it would give her a chance to escape." Gasps rippled through the crew, all eyes turning toward Isabela. Tavish's expression hardened, but he kept his focus on Carter. "Liar," Isabela hissed, stepping forward. "You're trying to save your skin by spinning tales." Tavish raised his hand, silencing her. "You'll have your chance to speak," he said, his gaze fixed on Carter. "But first, let's hear your story, Carter. What exactly did she promise you, and when?" Carter stammered, his eyes flicking between Tavish and Isabela. She promised me a share of the Spanish treasure she'd claim once she escaped. Said the ship would be adrift after the storm, easy pickings for a rescue." Tavish studied him, weighing every word. Then he turned to Isabela. "Your response?" Isabela's eyes blazed with fury. "He lies," she spat. "Why would I sabotage this ship when it would doom me as well? I have nothing to gain by sinking us in the middle of the ocean." Tavish considered her words, his mind working through the implications. She was right in one sense. The sabotage seemed too reckless for a prisoner with as much to lose as she had. But if not her, then what was Carter's real motive? "Enough," Tavish said, sheathing his cutlass. "Carter, you are hereby confined to the brig until we reach port. If I find evidence that you acted alone, you will be dealt with as a traitor." Carter was dragged away, protesting his innocence. Tavish turned to Isabela, his eyes cold. "If I find you had any part in this, you'll suffer the same fate. For now, you remain under guard." She glared at him but said nothing, turning away as the crew dispersed. Tavish watched her retreating figure, his thoughts in turmoil. She was becoming an enigma, one that might be his undoing, if he wasn't careful. The next morning, the Golden Maiden set sail once more, heading toward the waters of the Yucatan Peninsula. Tavish stood at the helm, the salty breeze whipping through his hair as he plotted their next move. As the ship sliced through the waves, he glanced toward the bow, where Isabela stood, the wind pulling at her cloak. For all her defiance, there was something about her that stirred a strange mix of emotions in him, a blend of distrust, curiosity, and a dangerous hint of admiration. There were battles yet to come, not just on the seas, but within the heart of the Golden Maiden itself. Tavish knew that his decisions in the coming days would shape the course of their journey, and perhaps his own fate. With a deep breath, he turned his gaze forward. The horizon stretched endlessly ahead, a canvas of possibilities. Whatever lay beyond, he would face it as he always had, fearless, cunning, and ready for whatever storm fate sent his way.
And so, the Golden Maiden sails on, but danger still lurks beneath the surface. Tavish One Eye McTavish has rooted out a saboteur, but questions remain. Who can truly be trusted? And what of Isabela, the mysterious woman whose presence on the ship has stirred both suspicion and something more? The winds of fate are shifting, and Tavish will need every ounce of cunning to survive the storms ahead. What do you think? Was Tavish right to trust his instincts, or should he be more wary of Isabela and his crew? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your ideas and theories might just shape the next chapter in this saga. If you enjoyed today's adventure, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. It helps support the channel and brings more swashbuckling stories to life. And make sure you're subscribed with the notification bell on, because there are many more battles, betrayals, and treasures waiting in Tavish's future. Until next time, may your sails be full and your compass true. Farewell for now.